You're listening to a DM podcast.
Hi, I'm Nigel Marsh, and this is the 5 of My Life podcast. The show where 5 choices reveal sideways insights into the lives, opinions, and lessons of interesting people. Tracey Spicer is a multiple Walkley Award winning author, journalist and broadcaster who was awarded the Order of Australia for her 30 years of media and charity work. It was an entertaining and enlightening joy hearing her discuss her choices. So Tracey, welcome to 5 of My Life.
Thanks so much for having me.
Are you well? I read somewhere that you might have long COVID. Is that right?
Yes, I had it for 2 years, but fortunately I'm about 99.5% better. For one of those years, I was predominantly either in bed or in a wheelchair. So I'm grateful to be upright and able to walk again.
Oh, that's wonderful news that you're better. I've got a friend who also, Vanessa, had long COVID and just terrible. You sort of think, when are you going to get well, poor person? But it is getting better. I'm glad that the evidence is suggesting that long COVID isn't permanent COVID.
Yes, because at the start we didn't know whether we'd end up with something similar to ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which used to be known as chronic fatigue syndrome, for life. I know quite a few young people who've got it as well, teenagers and young people in their 20s. And look, I'm in my 50s. I didn't mind staying at home, having a cup of tea and waiting for it to pass. But being a young person with this must be utterly debilitating.
So when you were sort of housebound, did you crack out lots of Netflix or books? Or did you learn Russian or play the piano? Or what did you do?
It's funny, they're finding a lot of people who end up with long COVID are your classic people who do a lot of things, I guess in the old school language, A-type personalities, people who like to achieve, all that kind of stuff. And so when you're stuck at home and you're used to doing so many things, you want to use the time to, do another degree, maybe learn a language. But you're so sick that honestly, for most days, I didn't even have the cognitive ability to watch television. Watching screens was actually too overwhelming for the system. However, as I got better, I spent all my time watching Netflix and BritBox. So if you need any reviews, I'm your person.
Now, I have to say, talking about watching things, is your TED speech, which is a while ago now, but that's one of my all-time favourite ones. I'm not one of those people that watches lots and lots of TED speech. I watched it because I did one as well, probably around the time that you did one. But I saw yours and just sensational. Do you still get? Because I still get emails. Did you get emails from people about that speech?
I do, Nigel. That's very kind of you to say, because that was back in 2014 and it was the first time I'd ever used PowerPoint. I mean, what a crazy thing to do, to memorise an 18-minute speech, to use a PowerPoint for the first time in such a public way. But thirdly, for people listening who haven't seen my TED Talk, I actually took my clothes off because I wanted to break down the excessive pressure, particularly on women in society, to appear a certain way with the makeup and the hair and the structured clothing and the high heels and the nail polish and all of that kind of unnecessary rubbish, really, when you think about it. So I got up there in my very structured dress and my high heels, took them off and ended up in a pair of shorts and a singlet, sprayed my hair. Oh, it was so funny on the day, there were women in the audience screaming, "Not the hair, anything but the hair," because we're so wedded, I guess, to having blow-dried, straightened hair. And when I sprayed it into the frizzy mess that it usually is, people were quite horrified. So, yes, I do still receive emails about that all these years later.
I just thought it was wonderful and authentic and charming. And it spoke to me because there are certain professions where it's reasonable to suggest, irrespective of gender, that you have to look, presentable. So I don't know, Carl can't have spinach in his teeth or something, right? But obviously there's a gender imbalance. But if you take it away from jobs where you are visually seen, you would think that all the stuff that you were talking about in your TED speech wouldn't apply. But that's not true. I had a girlfriend, we're talking 90 years ago, who I promise you in London, it would take her an hour and a half in the morning to get ready. And I mean, that's including the shower and whatever, but literally an hour and a half, and she had an office job. It was so important. You go, you needn't do that. You could spend maybe 10 minutes and you could, as you said, I don't know, go for a run, watch a film, study for an MBA. I mean, you could do, it's such a waste of time. And that doesn't mean, let yourself go and have twigs in your hair, but, anyway. So good on you.
Oh, thank you. It's a fascinating debate, though, because since that time, it's become worse. We've seen the Kardashian phenomenon. Younger women are getting things like Botox, which is entirely unnecessary. There's more facial work, more surgery going on. I guess an increased expectation of women to be overly groomed. But I've also softened my stance in a few different ways. One of the emails I did receive after my TED Talk was from a young woman in a remote village in India. And she said, I saw your TED Talk. I understand what you're trying to get at, but you need to understand that where I live, I have no power. I was not able to go to school. I'm probably not going to be able to go into the workforce. I'm likely to be married off. The only power I have over myself and my body is to groom, to use henna on my hands, to braid my hair, to put makeup on my face. That is my small piece of empowerment. So I see the whole spectrum of it now, I guess. Yes, it's unnecessary, but for some people, that's their empowerment.
It's a point well made, is you can't generalise. So, but now, can I try something mildly controversial out on you?
Oh, yes, please.
So not, and we're going to get to your choices in a second, but this is not for the situation that you described, because I completely get that. And like for my mum, who was a forces wife, and she, the government fired her when she got engaged. I mean, you can't, it was just normal. So the only platform that you have is how you look. Right? Do you feel that some of the pressure comes from women as well as men, or am I...
Oh, yes. I don't think your comment is controversial at all. And in fact, my husband has said this to me several times, and we've got a 17-year-old daughter. So this conversation is very, very front of mind. The way I view it is through the lens of history, that traditionally women have been viewed and valued more for their appearance rather than their intellect and what they can contribute to society, rather than what's in their hearts and their heads. And because of that history, a lot of us have, in the feminist parlance, internalised the misogyny and feel like we have to do this for broader society. And then you layer on top of that the mass media with our teenage daughter, that generation, they watch back-to-back American TV shows. And because in Australia, often we slavishly follow American examples in the cultural realm, and they want to look like those girls who are on television, who are getting all of that work done at a very young age. So I guess it's a combination of history, society, and the media. So
when you mention the media, I shouldn't laugh, but sometimes you have to, else it would be too depressing. There was... I think it was the Daily Mail or whatever. The best one, and I mean, I had to, stop because I was laughing. Right, I was supposed to be walking up the stairs from the train. It was the Daily Mail, and it had some poor actress, and when they circle, embarrassing, shameful things, and this woman was being shamed because she had ninkles.
What are ninkles?
This is brilliant, right? It didn't catch on because even for our moronic age, it was too stupid. Ninkles are the wrinkle where your knee bends. And you go, if you didn't have a ninkle, your leg would snap. You have to. It's like saying, Tracey's got a nose, and that's awful. You go, what's a ninkle? But yeah, so the media sometimes, oh my word.
Oh, that is so funny, because I remember years ago they used to show photos of supermodel Elle Macpherson's knees, and I'm talking 20 years ago, beautiful, beautiful woman in conventional standards, and they would focus on her knees and say, oh, she's showing her age around her knees. I had no idea knee sag was actually a thing.
So... we are going to get to your choices, because I could have it's so nice talking to you, Tracey. We always start with the film, and you have chosen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I need to ask, Wilder or Depp?
Oh, definitely Gene Wilder. Do you love it, the original?
So, well, I get told off because I crap on about things that I love, but you have chosen all your choices I adore, and Roald Dahl is possibly my favourite writer. I think he is an underrated genius. And yes, I absolutely adore Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But it's not about me. It's about you.
Yes, I read a lot of Roald Dahl books when I was a kid. I know he's controversial now, but I loved all the twisty-turny plots and the fact that there's a darkness to it as well. It shows you the light and shade of life. I particularly love that film because in our family, we watch it every Christmas and we love it every single time. I went really deep into researching it actually because I became so fascinated with its success. And I discovered that Gene Wilder actually created that first scene where he appears, where he walks out in a cane and then pretends to fall but does a somersault. He suggested that to the writers and producers. I also love the different characters of the children, that it speaks to more serious issues about them avoiding TV and avoiding sugar and all that kind of stuff. But also, as a kid from a really working class background, I loved watching that rags to riches story. Charlie Bucket coming from nothing with the grandparents sleeping in the bed together, poor old Grandpa Joe, and then he ends up with the chocolate factory. It just makes my heart sing.
It actually goes into sort of vernacular. Is when maybe on those occasions where all our family or lots of our family are sitting on the same bed, opening presents or whatever it might be. We talk about look at us, we're the Bucket family. It's a and Veruca Salt, and it's just sort of like a very layered film where there's things in it for I can imagine kids. I mean, slightly scary for really young kids. I can imagine it appealing to every different age. I might have to follow you because our family tradition this is awful, especially with gender politics. We watch Love Actually every year. And so I wish it was Willy Wonka.
Oh, no, a lot of people watch Love Actually every Christmas. I totally get that. Have you seen the new Willy Wonka with Timothée Chalamet, who I am inappropriately deeply in love with?
So this is Wonka. No, I haven't. Is it good?
I haven't yet because I'm frightened that if it's too good, I'll lose a bit of my love for the original. You know how, if you love a book so much, you don't necessarily want to see the film because you want to keep the images of the original in your head.
Yeah, no, so I had that with, we had James Valentine on and he chose Winnie the Pooh, which I adore. And I refuse to watch the Disney. I just can't do it because if they have messed it up, I'll be really upset. So I need the original. So when I asked you Wilder or Depp, I'm so glad you said Wilder because although I thought Johnny Depp did a good job, it's hey, you didn't need a remake. It's just like sometimes people make things again. You go, but why?
That's true. How can you improve on perfection? Having said that, I thought the Depp film was a work of genius as well in a different way because it had that Edward Scissorhands quality about it where it seemed quite surreal. It really did take you to a different world on another level.
And Tim Burton, interesting fellow, he is on record as saying that Roald Dahl was his biggest influence, full stop.
Interesting.
And exactly to the point that you made about light and shade. Is really clever to, kids can cope with, James and the Giant Peach, and it hasn't got to all just be the wheels on the bus.
The kids are drawn to dark content. Our daughter is particularly more than our son, interestingly, and she watched and consumed some really scary horror stuff as she was growing up, but it's all about allegories and lessons in life. I'm drawn to dystopian works for that reason.
Well, that is the perfect link to your book choice. So you have just again. So this is not. My listeners must know that this isn't fake. You choose whatever you want to choose. It's got nothing to do with me. But you've chosen possibly. It's not my favourite book. It's within the top two. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, 1932. Tell us why you've chosen that.
I'm delighted that you love it as well. I read it at school. Usually they'll give you 1984 or they'll give you Brave New World. I read both of them. And I became very quickly fascinated by this idea of the world state, that people have messages that are given to them from when they're very young, to be created to be the perfect workers in society, the perfect worker bees, I guess, but also the idea of soma, that everyone was given this, I suppose it was a combination of antidepressant and recreational drug, so that whatever was happening, it didn't matter. You had your soma as your escapism. Everyone was compulsorily drugged, I guess. And I see so many parallels with modern life, whether we zone out on television, whether we follow the stories of the Kardashians. I often think they're the modern soma. Social media can be equated to being the modern soma that numbs us to deal with the vagaries and difficulties in life. And it's one of those books, my son read it recently for school and he loved it as well. It still holds up even to this day.
Well, so I think not just holds up. I think if it was published for the first time now, it would be sort of revolutionary. It would be more revolutionary than Jordan Peterson or whoever it is. It's so thought-provoking. And there's a quote that Huxley said, which is, he feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance and that we would become a trivial culture due to mankind's almost infinite appetite for distractions. And you go, that's 1934. You could say that today, and you go, it's just astonishingly wise and terrifying. He calls it hedonistic nihilism. It is the notion that an essential part of freedom and meaning is the right to be unhappy. And you go,
yes,
wow. You go, but in our society, you think, hold on, what are you talking about? Everyone should be smacked out on soma or meth or ice or social media or blah. You go, no. If you actually want to make something of your brief time on this ridiculous rock, you have to have the right to be unhappy. Humanity is enslaved not by fear and terror, but by the bullshit distractions. By, I'm going to make everyone happy and smile and social media and this and that. And you go, what are we doing?
You have hit the nail on the head, particularly with that expression, hedonistic nihilism. And pointing out that it was written in 1934 reminds me that history repeats. That was, of course, leading up to the time of the Second World War. There was a fragmentation in society. We're seeing that now with the siloing of opinions, people going down their own bigoted rabbit holes, disinformation. There was a lot of disinformation and misinformation at that time. And I fear that at this time in history, we're leading up to a time of increased warfare because of this hedonistic nihilism. In fact, you could see it at the end of the Roman Empire as well, remember, with the excesses and the vomitoriums and the orgies and all of that kind of stuff. And not long after, it fell apart.
I can't help asking the question, like, what's the point? So if the point of existence is feeling good, then you should be permanently drunk. If that is the point. And then I'm not a killjoy. I like a laugh as much as the next person. But you go, but if that is the point, then it's sensible to be smacked out of your mind, because the point is feeling good. So where that leads is a dystopian bloody nightmare, and it's incredibly challenging and thought-provoking because the epsilons in the book. So for people who haven't read it, they breed castes of humans. So the alphas would be Tracey, independent, bright, smart, charming people who've got free will, and then you go down the caste system to the epsilons, who are non-thinking morons who do the horrible jobs. So they clean toilets and whatever, but they are unbelievably happy because they've been bred to be unbelievably happy doing that. Now, there's two views on that. I can go, wow, isn't that great? Or you can go, that's a nightmare. And you go, well, obviously it's a nightmare. So I think in our world, we struggle with the notion, both sides, of what freedom actually means.
Yes. And when you interpret it like that, in modern society, we've taken Huxley's concept and in a way flipped it on its head, because we have been inculcated to believe that if we work really hard and make lots and lots of money and become successful and powerful in society, that we will be happy at the so-called top level, but of course we're not. We've become obsessed with late-stage capitalism, uber productivity as a path to being happy, and that's not the truth either. So we've been sold a lie.
Now, we're moving to your third choice, which all your choices I've adored, but this is possibly my wife's favourite song, and it gets added to the Spotify playlist. It's now 9 hours long. It's superb. It's the algorithms don't give you the Spotify 5 My Life playlist because they give you the same stuff over and over again, whereas the 5 My Life one, it's completely random. And you've chosen Non, je ne regrette rien by Edith Piaf, 1960.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal.
Well, you said some lovely things about me before, Nigel, but deep in my heart, I am a wanker. I am a francophile. I want to go and live in Paris. And so I love everything French. And this was one of the most quintessential French torch songs. Again, actually, like Huxley's book, written around about that war era in the 1930s. And Edith Piaf had just a terrible life in anybody's terms. You know, her mother left her, her father's mother ran a brothel. She was basically brought up by the prostitutes. Her father was a street performer, took her out from the age of 14 to sing in the streets, to sing for their supper. But because of that, she's got a richness to her voice that we miss in this era of auto-tuning. She's got heartache and tragedy and struggle, and you can hear that in every note. I love all of her songs, but in particular this one, because the meaning is, I have no regrets about anything. And I think that is actually the secret to living a happy life, honestly, that, you know, sometimes things are shit, sometimes they're great, sometimes we make mistakes and stuff up, sometimes we do a good job, but you've just got to, you know, acknowledge that and keep moving forward and say, I have no regrets. I made the choices I did at the time. I've learnt from them and now I'm moving on.
Now, I wouldn't be an interviewer worth his salt if I didn't ask, given the title of the song and given what you've just said, would you talk to some of the things that, if you weren't as clever as Edith Piaf suggests that you should be, that you, well, let's not say regret, but the mistakes that you've learnt from? What would some of those be in your life?
You're a very good interviewer. Excellent follow-up question. The biggest one would be not standing up for myself and not speaking out earlier when I worked in the media in that homogenised, back in the era of the dolly birds, sitting there on the news desk reading the news with the man reading the intro to the first story and me sitting there effectively like his handbag, some kind of accoutrement. I didn't really grasp my power as a young woman because I didn't feel like I had any power. I felt like, even though I'd done a journalism degree, even though I knew I was intelligent, I felt like I was there purely for my appearance, and that was a depreciating currency, and that was what I had to lean on, and stood there on the red carpets, all dressed up with the makeup and the hair and all that stuff, and didn't think deeply enough about it for probably the first 10 or 15 years. I regret that, but then I've forgiven myself because eventually my head did explode. I took Network 10 to the federal court for pregnancy and maternity discrimination after I lost my job just weeks after giving birth to our second child. And look, that was 17 years ago. I'm glad that I finally stood up for myself, but I regret taking a long time to do that.
It needs people like you, Tina Fey, whoever they are. I mean, I'm obviously the last person to be up on 4th, 6th, 7th, 8th waves of feminism, but I have to believe that things are getting better. So if your daughter joined Channel 10, God forbid, and they said, could you get your tits out more, she would feel empowered to say, mate, that's completely inappropriate and I'm actually going to HR and I'll get you fired, you twat. You know, but for you to do it 20 years ago, don't be too hard on yourself.
I'm really inspired by that generation. They take no prisoners.
Yeah.
They will speak out, but importantly, they know the language, they know their rights, they know laws, they understand consent. Things have moved on dramatically. There certainly still is that power imbalance between an employer who's often older and a younger employee, but that's regardless of gender. The young women, they really, really understand their power and take it. I love it.
I'm not in the daily popular news cycle, but there's something that broke through that even I saw, which shows that the job is not done yet, but the reaction was quite heartening. Some woman who had her photo retouched to give her bigger tits and show her midriff. This is beyond absurd. And then the excuse for how it happened, blatant lies. Poor woman who was a politician or something. You send a picture and then a picture appears and they've sort of undressed you. But the great thing is just maybe 30 years ago there wouldn't have been a stink about it. You'd go, well, she looks better, she's got bigger boobs and we can see her tummy. But now you go, what are you doing?
That's true. There's outrage about it these days. This is a really interesting case because the media organisation was blaming artificial intelligence.
That's rubbish. That's rubbish. Bullshit.
Well, I looked really deeply into it because I've just written this book on AI called Man-Made. And when we created the cover for the book, we used an app called Midjourney. I put in 12 words to create a unique image, of course, ripped off from billions of copyrighted images, but that's another story. And the words I put in were I wanted to see a robot woman looking to the future with hope but concern. The image it came up with was a highly sexualised gold robot woman with massive boobs, a tiny waist, and huge guns, like massive biceps, because the robot read woman as being sexualised and read strong as being physically strong,
right,
not necessarily mentally strong. So what I actually think happened with that politician's image is that, yes, it was the media organisation's fault because they didn't have proper oversight, but when you put images of women into these algorithms, they inevitably slightly sexualise women and girls. It's the way that they're designed. It's because historically there's more images of sexualised women online than men, so the data sets are heavy with that kind of stuff. And then there's the unconscious bias in the algorithm. So this is a fascinating Brave New World kind of area for the future.
I mean, it's terrifying in a way because you go, blimey, even if people have got their heads straight, if the robots haven't, you go, bloody hell, it's a tough old road. It's like the example of seatbelts being tested on men, and I sort of understand why it happened. Seatbelts are disastrously unsafe for women because they were tested on men, and you go, surely we can be a bit better than that.
Exactly. One of the most fascinating examples I uncovered was, those dummies that you use to learn how to resuscitate someone. If someone falls over in the street, you do chest compressions. Because they'd only used male torsos in testing for decades, they were finding if a woman collapsed in the street and a man would run over to help her, he'd go, oh, no, I don't want to touch her breasts. I haven't practiced on breasts before. So then they had to simply create some resuscitation dummies with breasts. Some of the solutions to this are pretty simple.
And we're moving to your place, and you've chosen North Curl Beach. Oh, my word, what a rock pool. How beautiful. Tell us, could you describe it, where it is for our listeners who maybe aren't in Australia, and tell us why you've chosen it?
Yes, often when I say I live in North Curl, if I'm on a phone and someone's asked for my address and they don't live in Australia, they laugh. North Curl? You live in a place that's called Curl? Yes, it's on the beach, as you would expect. It's on Sydney's northern beaches, about half an hour's drive from the city. It's a really good surf break actually in the corner. It's got these towering sandstone cliffs that at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon before sunset turn almost like a burnt umber colour. It's also got a beautiful still rock pool. So if you don't want to body surf or get knocked about in the waves, you can just go and have a gentle swim. There's thriving marine life there. I love paddleboarding and snorkeling and any kind of water sport. I'm right there. So it's my absolutely favourite place. Although having said that, you have to be a little bit careful. For those of you who are listening and don't live in Australia, I know everyone thinks we've got all the deadly animals in the world. We kind of do here. There's often a blue-ringed octopus that likes to sit at the very end of the pool. So if people are doing laps, you have to be careful. You don't want to touch your hand on a blue-ringed octopus. It can kill you.
And how long have you been there?
Oh, a long time. Probably 23 years now. I'm originally from Brisbane, moved down, lived all over the place, of course, like all of us when we're young, and then settled in Sydney about 30 years ago. And we've raised our children here in the same house. There's a dog park down the road where we can take our very old border collie. She's really stiff, but she can still give the young pups a bit of a run around.
Going back to your song, you mentioned dear old Edith's parents who won't be winning any awards for their parenthood. What was your early childhood like? So your kids growing up in North Kirkhill, well done, gold star for you. What was mum and dad's upbringing for you like?
Oh, it was very different, but there were similarities. I was fortunate to have fantastic parents. My dad's still with us. He's 83. He got COVID recently, but thank God for the antivirals. He made it through. He is a really sensitive, soft, beautiful, kind, deep-thinking man. My mother, who sadly died about 25 years ago, was for the era quite an outlier. Worked full-time, very strong woman, very outspoken. You didn't mess with Tracey Spicer. She had quick comebacks. She'd slice you down in a moment, you know, that kind of person, really, really feisty personality. So my sister and I were fortunate to grow up with really loving but very interesting parents, different to the cookie cutter of the era, I guess, where mum was more the dominant figure than dad. And I guess the only other thing I would say about the area we grew up in was we were classically lower middle class, but we lived in a very low socioeconomic area, which was incredibly rough. It's called Redcliffe, aka Dead Cliff. A lot of violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of unemployment, all of that kind of stuff. So that gave me a passion from a very young age for social justice because I saw a lot of the struggles that people were facing. One thing that does worry me about our parenting, my husband and I, living now in a higher socioeconomic area, is our kids really don't understand a lot of the struggles that people face.
Yeah. Was it just you and your sister, or was there other siblings? Or
Yeah, just my sister and I, and 3 years apart, fought like cat and dog for most of our childhood, very different people. But from our early 20s, we've been pretty much best friends, and we're still best friends. We've got kids exactly the same age. Even though she lives in Brisbane, the cousins see each other a lot. I'm up there probably 5 or 6 times a year to see her and Dad. We're still really close.
I love it. Hope she's not in Deadcliff, is she?
Not in Deadcliff. She's moved to a higher socioeconomic area as well. Although I was thinking about that thing about how kids need to understand struggle. And I guess that generation understands it from the lockdowns in the pandemic and having to do schooling online from at home, regardless of what kind of area you live in. This generation has built up a level of resilience because of that.
I think there's something, I mean, I've got no clever answers to this, but there is something toxic in modern developed societies, in cities, where there isn't an appropriate mix of different socio-economic lifestyles. So back in an English village in the 1970s where I grew up, you'd have everyone. It just would be a representation of life because everyone lived there. Rich people, poor people, old, young. I mean, that's just where you lived. Whereas now there's sort of pockets of, well, if you've made it, everyone affluent lives there. It's life. Life isn't made up of just millionaires or successful media people. So don't get me started.
I agree. Well, if memory serves me correctly, they did that terrifically in London a couple of decades ago, put social housing in wealthier areas to create more mixed housing. And I know various governments have tried that here in Australia, but there's such a NIMBYism and pushback that a lot of them have dropped the idea.
Now, your last choice is always the possession, and you have chosen, and I'm quoting, birthday letters from my kids. So you're going to have to describe them before you tell us why.
Well, every time it's my birthday or Mother's Day or Christmas, from when the kids were very, very little, from the moment they learnt to write, I said to them, I don't want anything. I don't want a gift. I don't want you to go out and get me something. I don't need any more things. I want you to get a piece of paper and write down what your thoughts are on our relationship, the year, how you're feeling, what you think about our family, what you love, what you don't necessarily like, how you feel about yourself, so I could have those to look back on. And also at the time to deepen the connection, to see where the kids are actually at, because kids are great and they talk to you when they're younger, but then when they turn, 13 or 14 or whatever, they tend to shut down. So because there has been this habit over a lifetime, I get this beautiful letter a couple of times a year where they tell me where they're really at. And it's been the gift that keeps on giving, honestly.
What a wonderful thing to have decided to do early on. I mean, that's heavenly. And how often do you reread them? I suppose when you got long COVID, you sit down there.
Oh, yeah, I really did. I've got a husband who I adore, but possibly undiagnosed OCD. So he cleans the house constantly. We're always cleaning out drawers and things like that. So I look at it regularly just to see, oh, yes, I can throw that stuff out. That's a work-related piece of paper. But no, I'm keeping all of these. They are absolutely precious.
And your kids now, I've got this right, they are 20 and 19 or?
17 and 19. Our daughter's doing year 12 and our son just started uni this week. So it's a very exciting time. It's like living with two adults in the house. Honestly, it's much easier than when they were toddlers.
How was the motherhood experience for you? Did that come easily? Was it surprising, joyful?
I was one of those women of an era where career was everything. Our mother said to my sister and I, you don't have to have children. You don't have to have a family. Don't feel obliged. Go out, forge your path in the world, choose your adventure effectively. So when I got to my early 30s, I thought, oh, gosh, I probably should have children if I'm going to. I'm getting to that age where the eggs are starting to fall apart. But I didn't feel like I had any maternal instinct, to be honest. Then, when I was about 34, the maternal instinct hit me like a freight train, and I was almost abducting babies out of prams when people pushing them down the street. I was a danger to society. My husband and I tried for a year. Naturally, nothing happened. I went off, said to the IVF nurse, give me all the drugs you've got. For 2 years, we did IVF and eventually became pregnant when I was 37 with Taj and then 39 with Grace. I was technically a geriatric mother. That had benefits and disadvantages. I had some really serious health complications, but as an older parent, I kind of felt a little bit more mature and sensible. So when they were born, I felt really comfortable with it. My husband and I, we had, until I lost my job, secure jobs, so we thought. And I fell in love with parenting. I absolutely, when I lost my job at Channel 10, I thought, if I don't work again, that's okay. I love being at home with these two little creatures. In fact, I changed my career then to become a family travel writer so I could work and bring them around the world. We took them to Morocco when they were 3 and 4 years old. My son kissed a monkey on the lips in the Jabal El Fanar, and my daughter had 3 snakes around her neck. I wanted to work involving the children. So I think, like a lot of parents, I went from one extreme to the other. No, never, to this is the best thing ever.
That's such a wonderful story. And I think I'm an optimist that we are getting to a stage where your kids, when they get to making the decisions that you made, it might not be as stark as it has to be one or the other. And sometimes in our society, what people do is they justify the lifestyle choices that they've made by criticising the choices that other people have made that are different. And with a little bit of empathetic kindness, you go, just bloody do you. Can we all calm down a bit? Where obviously there's going to be a century of transition where everyone's sort of, up in arms about people making different choices. But I do see certain commentators who I like and I agree with where they're coming from, but I don't like the unconscious sneering that they don't even know they're doing about other people's choices. You go, well done for you. Well done. You hate marriage. You don't want to have kids. You want to be top of the firm. Well done. That's really, really good. That doesn't make you any better than the person that hasn't, and vice versa. So I love the fact that you've been at both ends of the spectrum and both were good. You didn't betray your previous self or whatever. You're just living a wonderful life. And I think I love your mum's phrase, choose your adventure. This has been just such a lovely conversation, but you're not off the hook. There's a sixth choice.
Oh, secret.
Yeah. And the mate, don't let me down. You need to choose who you would like to hear on Five My Life next, and tell me why.
Oh, this is exciting. I don't know whether you've interviewed him yet, but I love Trent Dalton. Have you done him? I
haven't done Trent. I'll be very, very happy to.
Boy Swallows Universe was my favourite book in the last 20 years, aside from Brave New World. I also loved his second one, All the Shimmering Skies, and I recently watched the Boy Swallows Universe series on Netflix. It is phenomenal. It's got everything: heart, darkness, pathos, humour. Trent is a genius.
But also, it's from, it's not Deadcliff, but it's around you. It resonated with your upbringing.
You've picked up on that well. Yes, it's set in Darra, which is basically Redcliffe on the other side of Brisbane.
Tracey, it's been so lovely talking to you, and you do such great work. I urge everybody who hasn't to check out your TED speech and your two wonderful books. But they're both fantastic. But thank you for coming on Five My Life and discussing your choices.
Well, thank you for your beautiful and insightful questions, Nigel. It's been a joy.
Thank you for listening to the show, and thank you for all your messages with guest suggestions and feedback on the episodes. The Five of My Life audience really is a lovely, engaged community. Please do keep the messages coming in. The best way is through my website. And if you have a friend who you feel might enjoy a particular guest, please do forward the episode on. I do the show on my own, so without a marketing budget, word of mouth really is the only way of people discovering the show.